I'll start. You ever had that nagging feeling that you don't belong? Last week I went to the Winnipeg Jets game in Winnipeg, where it exists. And I didn't actually think about it until we were walking down the street, and suddenly I was the focus of several comments. Now, the good thing is that normally speaking, as a Rider fan, we lose a lot, and and in Winnipeg they've won a lot, and that's not true this year. This year, Trevor, we win, and we're still winning, but we have a sense of maybe we're going to lose soon. So anyway, I stuck out so much there, and I think that probably you felt that sense of sticking out and not belonging, and it's not comfortable, is it? Sometimes we enter a room and realize, oh, I don't belong here. And maybe you say, oh, I didn't realize we were supposed to dress up before I came. Or maybe you were told it was a costume party, and it wasn't. It was just you. I felt this numerous times in my life. It probably started for me on the elementary school playground. Diesta's grade 3 students have a word for this. They say they were discluded. They discluded me. For those of you who don't speak English as a first language, discluded is not a word. But it sounds like a word, right? It's something that you can identify with. A time when you did not belong, when other people said, no, you don't belong. Maybe you can relate to this quote from L.J. Smith in The Awakening. He says, right now everything looks strange to me as if I don't belong here. It's me that's out of place. And the worst thing is that I feel that there's somewhere that I do belong, but I just can't find it. As human beings, we all have this need to belong inside of us. It's just part of what it means to be human. And when it comes to our experience of church, the question of belonging is pretty central. If you've been around church for a long time, you're probably familiar with this question: is he or she a member? Well, what does that mean exactly? I know what it meant for some people in our family. It meant, were they baptized at some point? Doesn't matter if they came ever, but some point they were baptized. Or maybe it means, do they come here on Sunday morning regularly? For the Canada Revenue Agency, membership in our community amounts to, do you give at least once a quarter? And that's, you belong if you give. So yes, giving often indicates that you're committed to a group, but there are lots of people who give or attend here and don't feel like they belong. And there are others who never attend here, never give any money, but when asked, they would say, yes, that's my church. I belong there. This topic of belonging has only gotten more confusing for us, of course, as technology has made it possible for us to connect to people easily, even when we're not in the same place. For many people, some of you who are watching today, our YouTube service is a lifeline, a chance to connect, to belong, even though they cannot be physically present with us. So what does it mean for you and me to belong? I've been thinking about that question a lot over the last few weeks. The New Testament talks about our relationship to the church as one of belonging, of being part of a family, and yet that's not always our experience of church, is it? If it is, it's sometimes more like a dysfunctional family. Sometimes churches sell themselves as places to belong, a place to find family, a place to find deep, intimate relationships. But what it often delivers is a lot less than that, and sometimes a lot worse than that. Gossip, hurt, anger, a lot of shaming, a lot of disclusion. Unless you believe and do as we believe and do, you don't belong. So this morning what I want to do is spend a few minutes thinking about the concept of belonging and how it actually works in our lives, especially as it relates to the various spaces in our lives. And I'm going to draw heavily on a variety of authors such as Joseph Myers, who wrote a book I first read 20 years ago called The Search to Belong, and which I reread again over the last few weeks. So let's start with the basic definition you see there. Belonging is the quiet, powerful sense that you are and are allowed to be exactly where you are. So the belonging is the feeling that you have when your presence is appropriate, when it is welcomed, and when it is meaningful. In the 1960s, an author named Edward Hall wrote a book that pioneered the study of something called proxemics, that is, the study of space, physical spaces. And in it, he suggested that as humans, we function in a variety of physical spaces. So right now, you and I are in a physical space. That is something that is over 12 plus feet between you and me. Now, if I was to move closer to you, let's say I move closer to Troy, we become in a social space. We're in 4 to 12 feet. We can talk to each other. We're not connected in any deep way. We can look at each other's eyes and it's fine. But if I move closer, I would move into what we might call a personal space, right? And in a personal space, we're comfortable with each other right in this, 18 inches to 4 feet or 45 centimeters to a meter. And we can talk to each other. So this would be someone that you sit across the table at, maybe you're having dinner with, McDonald's or whatever, you're set up in personal spaces, right? But if you get really close and you come up to about here, you start to become in an intimate space. And at this point, Troy starts feeling uncomfortable. Right? There are only certain people that you feel like it's okay for you to be in an intimate space. So if I was to sit down here and I give her a hug, she's sort of okay with this. What's the problem? The problem is that we connect in intimate ways, but not in a public space, right? And you and I know that, you can go back, you and I know how to behave in each of those spaces. These 4 spaces communicate that we belong to each other, but on different levels. So the question might be, which space is the most important? Which one is the best one? Well, it depends, right? It depends. It depends what's the purpose of the space that is between us. There are all sorts of social rules around these spaces. We even have phrases to describe these spaces. We say, he was in my face. And that was not usually appropriate. He was in my face because he was angry and aggressive, and that made me feel uncomfortable. We are uncomfortable when people invade our personal space. And if you've had that experience of walking into the wrong bathroom, you notice it almost immediately, don't you? Oh, oops, I don't belong here. But if you're a toddler, bathroom boundaries are completely irrelevant to you, right? You walk in and out, doesn't matter what people are doing in the bathroom, you just belong there, in their private, intimate space, and it's okay. Think about the shopping experience. Let's say you go to a drugstore to buy some personal items, and the salesperson follows you around. suggesting options, trying to get involved in a conversation. How do you feel about that? No, thank you. It's annoying, right? And you can think of many examples. People who don't catch the verbal, nonverbal, or social cues. The person who wants to touch you, to hug you, to talk and talk and talk and talk nonstop. A coworker who doesn't catch the hint that you would like them to go away so that you can do some work. The person who is insistent on telling you the famous TMI, right? Too much information. Or the couple who are constantly engaged in PDA, public displays of affection that make everyone around them uncomfortable. For different cultures, we have different rules about different spaces of belonging and how they work. Think of some of the most awkward spaces we experience. You get into an elevator and it's crowded, right? And what happens? Your space has changed radically. It's a public moment. You don't know any of these people and you don't want to, and yet you're right up against them. And it makes us feel uncomfortable. And when we find ourselves in physical spaces when people aren't following the expected social behavior, the sociologist Judy Burgoon calls those expectation violations, and we get really uncomfortable. This week, the power went out in the building on Thursday morning. And on Thursday morning, what happens in our building is that there is a large group of Chinese seniors who come to the gym to do Tai Chi. You can't do Tai Chi in the dark. So we decided that they could just do it in the hallway. So they are moving, and I have to get from my office to the youth room, and I'm doing this sort of bob and weave between it, and we're all really, really uncomfortable because they're doing it in a space that's not the right space. And that feels weird. Last week I experienced also one of the most uncomfortable physical spaces that we have, the plane. You know that feeling, right? Hundreds of people crammed into seats that aren't big enough. And so you are knee to knee with people, arm to arm, and some of the people do weird things. Take their shoes and socks off. That's just gross. Don't do it. I don't know anybody on the plane. I know nobody. But we are all physically in each other's space. So what do we do when we get it there? I don't look at the person. I put my bag up in the overhead compartment. I don't look. I put my bag under. I slide in sort of sideways, still haven't looked at her. And I put my headphones in, put my book out. Perhaps we get a window seat and we put our pillow on the edge and immediately close our eyes and put our head against that. But inevitably, what happens? I've got my book out, I have my headphones in, and the lady beside me says, "What you reading?" Well, I'm reading about a book about spaces to belong and how people don't always interpret the social clues that they don't want to talk. Now, by the way, we did end up having a lovely conversation, but I have no idea what her name is or why she needed to talk to me. In thinking about these spaces, Joseph Myers argues that we have made some mistakes in thinking about belonging in these spaces. He argues that more than physical spaces, these physical spaces that Edward Hall had talked about are actually more relational spaces. They are spaces of belonging, and that all of them are important to our sense of belonging. So in public spaces, most of our relationships are actually here, right? Often we are actually anonymous. We're standing in the election line on Monday night. It was going to take forever because of new government rules and because of postal strike, etc. And we're all standing there, and we don't know each other, but we talk to each other because we are all there in a public space for a specific purpose. Sometimes we go to places where we cheer for the same sports team, or we wear the official clothing, we watch all the games, we cheer collectively when our team wins. And whether we're long-term fans or we've just jumped on the bandwagon for the World Series, we share a sense of belonging with the rest of the people. We don't even have to be in the same physical space. We can be watching our TVs all over the country and think, oh, Blue Jays. I'm in favor of that. Or Dodgers, if you're certain people. When Odell and I went to the Flames game last week, we had a sense of belonging with the rest of the people. That's what we experience. When the Flames score, which admittedly does not happen very often, we stand up and cheer with thousands of other fans. We might even physically contact them by giving them high fives, or we might comment on the save the goalie just made. Is that real belonging? Well, of course it is. You belong in that space for a specific purpose. And you and I are interacting in the public space right now. About 170 of us meet every week in this physical space. And we meet in the YouTube space, and we participate in a bunch of actions together. To say that that's unimportant is not true. And when we don't get the chance to belong in the public spaces of life, we miss something that's really important. For some of you, this is the space in which you are most comfortable, especially if you're introverted or you experience social anxiety or you just dislike talking to people or you dislike people, I suppose. That's just fine for you to belong there. Then there's the social space, what Myers describes as a space where we share snapshots of ourselves. You and I belong socially to the grocery clerk and to our optometrist. This is the place where we share small talk, where we want to put our best foot forward. These are acquaintances and friends, but not close friends. Social belonging is important for a couple of reasons. First, it provides the space for what we might call neighbor relationships. A neighbor, as Myers defines it, is someone you know well enough to ask or provide small favors to. So you lend or borrow tools. You ask someone to watch your house while you're away. You need some help moving, and they might help. And second, it provides a place where you can decide and when you can choose and sort whether the people in front of you might be someone in which you might want a more personal relationship. Sometimes we decide, yes, I'd like to know someone better. Sometimes we say, no, I'm comfortable with this relationship staying in the social space, and that's okay. In the personal space, this is the space where we share private experiences, feelings, and thoughts. We call the people we connect to in this place close friends. And we don't have piles of close friends, but we have friends. And then finally, there's an intimate space, and in this space, we share our naked selves, physically if with a spouse, but also our deepest and most vulnerable thoughts and feelings, our naked thoughts and feelings. And these people who are in our intimate space know the deepest and most intimate truths and naked truth about us, and as it says in Genesis, the two of us are not ashamed to know those things about each other. Now, it's important to understand that all of these spaces are important to healthy community. You need all of those spaces in your life, and so does a church. Belonging happens in all of them. They are not better or worse forms of belonging. Sometimes churches get in the habit of promising people that all of our relationships can be and should be in the personal, intimate space with each other. Myers calls this the myth of intimacy, because that's not how it works in reality. It's not a pipeline where in order to belong, you have to move from public to social to personal to intimate with everyone we meet. We can belong to each other in all of these spaces, but there are limits. Myers argues that in practice, it works more like this formula you see, where in the for every one intimate relationship you have, you might have 2 personal and 4 social and 8 public. That makes sense, right? The numbers might not be exactly right, but you understand that there are only a few people that you can really share everything about yourself with. And then there are others in which you share other levels of relationship. In fact, when people invade our personal and intimate space without permission, it's deeply disturbing to us. So, really quickly, I want to talk about a bunch of things that just about how belonging actually works. So the first thing is this, that belonging exists on a spectrum. So I am not going to be intimate or personal with all of you. I'm going to be intimate with some of you, personal with some of you, social with some of you, public with some of you. That's normal and that's right. So one of the things that I'm doing this morning is trying to help you understand why that happens like that. Why some people are really close and some are not, and you should not feel bad about that. A healthy belonging balances being known and being safe. Brené Brown argues that the basis of belonging is vulnerability. But vulnerability, the ability to share who you are, only happens when it's safe. Nobody thinks that someone who has been sexually abused should be forced into small private spaces with their abuser. We only belong where we feel safe. Belonging is reciprocal. That is, that it requires something from both parts of a relationship. You both give and you receive. You do both parts of that. Belonging is contextual, and it looks different in different spaces. Think about your camp experience as a child. You go to camp, let's say, especially as a junior high person. You go to camp and you leave all your close friends behind you, right? And then you get to camp and you experience something different and something close and personal and intimate and exciting, and you get really tied up with these people, and you call them your close friends. And when it gets to Friday night, what happens is you say, oh, we're going to leave. We don't live anywhere near each other, but we're going to stay close, right? I promise to write. Nobody does that. And then when you get back to your friends where you live, you start talking about all the close friends that you made at camp, and they don't know them. And there's an awkwardness as you try to navigate how does that work. Belonging then is dynamic. In our relationships, you move between these spaces. Our lives intersect with each other in a variety of ways over time. So I would suggest that one of the things we need to realize is that relationships don't stay forever. That actually the people that we are in relationship now may or may not be there in 10 years, and that's okay. We live in a world where people move constantly, right? They're moving geographically, but we also move when it comes to relationships. That should be expected. In fact, some people you would say, I don't know what happened. We're not as close as we were before. And there can be some grieving and loss about that, but there also is a sense at some point which say we accept that that is also true. Even our most intimate relationships exist in more than one space, and we just demonstrated that to you. When Diesta and I are at home, we have a different relationship than how it plays out in a public space like this. That's okay. That's normal. So people move, relationships move and change, and they are affected by our personalities, by our phases in life. Are we single? Are we married? Do we have kids? How old are we? What's our health look like? What's our personality? Belonging is usually not instant. Camp might be one of those places where it becomes sort of like that. But deep relationships are developed over time and with repetition of small, consistent behaviors. So you and I can and should belong in multiple spaces. Myers used this phrase, belonging poverty, to refer to a condition where people lack access to one of these spaces. You don't have any intimate friendships. You don't have any public spaces. And you expect, for example, one of the things that happens in marriages is you have this idea given to you by books and movies or whatever that you're going to be intimate and personal with this person all the time. And then you figure out, I can't be everything that they need. My wife needs to have other relationships besides me. I can't fill all of those spots for her. Lest you think I'm just making this up and not thinking about it biblically, take a quick look at what Paul says about how the church functions and how Jesus conducted his ministry on earth. Think about a book like Ephesians. The basic argument that Paul makes in Ephesians is that our primary identity of followers of Jesus is that we are people that are in Christ, that we have been transformed from strangers into family because of the grace of God. And through the sacrifice of Jesus, all the barriers that are between us, and they're real, gender, ethnicity, age, social or economic status, they've all been destroyed. They've all been knocked down. So he says it this way in Galatians 3. So in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ, and as a result, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, nor is there male nor female, for you are all one in Jesus. It's our status of being in Christ that makes us brothers and sisters, that makes us family. This is what he writes in Romans chapter 12. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. But that objective reality that God says we belong to each other, and so we do, does not mean that you and I always feel that belonging. We only have a limited amount of emotional bandwidth to have personal and intimate relationships. So belonging cannot mean that personal and intimate spaces are the only place where we experience the belonging Paul's talking about. As we said, we usually have about 170 people that meet here on Sunday and another 50 to 100 that watch us online sometime during the week. Some of you just want to connect publicly or anonymously on the internet. Some of you are comfortable with the social space that happens when our assembly ends. And some of you have chosen to develop more personal relationships in smaller group settings. All of those spaces are necessary spaces where you can choose to experience belonging. Which space is better for you is going to depend on your personal context, but God invites all of us to belong. Think about how Jesus conducted his ministry in a variety of spaces. In the public space, Jesus created shared experiences for crowds, right? He fed the 5,000. He spoke to thousands in the Sermon on the Mount. He taught in synagogues. He taught in temple courts where lots of people were there. The crowds could hear his teaching. They could witness miracles. They could participate in the movement around Jesus without anybody knowing their names or stories. And some people, like the woman who touched his garment in a crowd and was healed, would have small interactions with Jesus and then would disappear back into the crowd. Or how about the story of the centurion in Mark chapter 8? When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. And Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and the servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. The centurion didn't need to have Jesus come to his house. He was content to remain in a public and social space, and Jesus too was fine with that. In the social space, we see Jesus creating multiple opportunities for people to interact with him socially in the social space, often around meals, and this is the common place where we also experience this. And around meals, he invited a wide diversity of people, Pharisees and tax collectors, men and women, disciples, and the people who were against Jesus. This social space work was important because it bridged the gap between public and personal, where people could move from being an anonymous person in a crowd to becoming a dinner guest without having to move to a really, really vulnerable personal space. Zacchaeus would be an example of this. Jesus invites himself to dinner with the tax collector, and transformation happened in that social space. In the personal space, where did Jesus' ministry concentrate on? The 12 disciples, right? Those were his friends. He shared more with them than he did with the crowds. He explained parables more fully. He finished the sermon sometimes with them. He shared his long-term mission more fully with them. He had personal conversations with them, spending long hours and days traveling. And in this personal space, there was room for those disciples to ask questions that the people in the other spaces could not ask, to express their own doubts, to work through their own issues. Social research suggests that it takes about 200 hours for us as humans to create a friendship relationship. That Jesus spent that kind of time with the disciples. And yet Jesus also had an inner circle, didn't he, among those 12? He had 3 that he was more intimate with, Peter and James and John. And they were the ones he brought into the most vulnerable moments of his life and the biggest moments of his life. They were the only ones who witnessed the transfiguration on the mountain. They were the only ones who saw Jesus at his most emotional moments in the Garden of Gethsemane. In other words, there was a clear distinction in the way that Jesus related to those 3 compared to how he related to the 12 or the 72 or the crowds of 5,000. Jesus allowed people to stay in the spaces of belonging that they chose, and he himself chose some to enter into more intimate space. What the ministry of Jesus shows us is that people can legitimately belong to Jesus in a variety of spaces. So here are some of the implications of that. Belonging is based on the identity that God gives us, not on our performance. So Jesus ate with sinners while they were still sinning. He created spaces for people to belong before they repented of sin, before they believed him as the Son of God, before they committed to follow him and leave everything behind. And so the church has to do the same thing, because our identity as the children of God is not based on our performance, but on God's decision to grant us grace. And so we as a church, like Jesus, want to allow you to belong to our congregation in whatever way you want to. Some of you are going to want to stay in the public space. Some of you will be more comfortable in the social space, connecting to us without committing to us. Some of you will want to commit to this group of believers that meets here by regularly attending our gatherings, by giving money, by giving time and energy and service to each other as well as our neighborhood. And some of you might take the opportunity to belong in more personal ways by joining a smaller group or finding a person or two where you might want to develop closer and stronger relationship. All of those options are available to you. Our commitment to you as a church is to try to offer you as many spaces as possible where you can belong with us. We want you to feel safe. We want you to feel comfortable here. And that's why we spend money on fences and lights and alarm systems and chairs and screens. But we will not force you to participate beyond what you are comfortable with. But we will give you the opportunity. For example, if you're looking for a place where you can intimately worship God a little more anonymously, but at the same time with others, I highly encourage you to join us at 9:30 on Sundays. Our worship space there is different from our worship space at 10. We have smaller groups that meet almost every day of the week, whether you want to study the Bible more deeply, whether you just want to knit and have some conversation, whether you want to discuss the sermon topics more fully, whether you just want someone to go skiing or play golf with. We want to be a place where you can find rest from your struggles, some space and hopefully some answers for your questions, some encouragement to keep going when you know that following Jesus is hard, some direction when you feel lost, some assurance and hope when your sins are overwhelming you, and some comfort for your grief and your loss. But you have to decide to enter those spaces. We can't and we won't make you, but we will invite you. You don't have to stay as a stranger here. We want to invite you to belong in whatever way you feel comfortable. For those of you who already call this community home, let me encourage you to be aware of how you can contribute to healthy community based on this discussion. First, it's very easy for us to say to others, as we sang this morning, "Come as you are," but then to demand something closer to become who we need you to be. We have to allow people to fail, to question, to disagree with us, while at the same time encouraging them to walk with us toward Jesus. You can disagree with us, and you can still belong to us. I encourage you to be very aware of your language and your posture, to not be casual about how you promise family to people. And also, let's be aware of the way that spaces of belonging work. Not all spaces are appropriate for all kinds of behavior and disclosure. Myers talks about us needing social competencies in each space. That is, we learn how to behave in each space, and we need to spend some time developing those skills. So pay attention to the social cues that you are sending and that people are sending you. Pay attention to how you speak and how your speech might lean towards us and them language, and stop doing that. Learn to be okay with questioning and pain without having to fix things for people. Show up authentically and listen and listen and listen again. You might introduce yourself in that social space to someone who is different from you and invite them into a conversation. And let your message be not clean up your life and then I'll accept you, but you belong with us. Now let's walk together towards Jesus. And so belonging is both a gift that God gives us and requires some work. God gathers us, but we have to show up. We have to invest time. We have to risk vulnerability. So we believe that the church is the family of God, a community that is called into existence by Christ across all the dividing lines that usually separate us. And our goal is to make that vision a reality, but we also acknowledge that we often fall short of that reality. We want to be a community where belonging develops across multiple spaces, through worship, through fellowship, through occasions for service, through small groups, through gatherings that are just for fun, through deeper, close friendships. We can't promise you that you're going to immediately feel at home here, or that you're going to find your soulmate here. But we do commit to creating a welcoming culture where belonging happens. And all spaces of belonging are valued. People like you belong here, and you matter here, exactly as you are, whatever level of engagement feels right for you today. Let's acknowledge the reality that belonging takes time, often months or years of patient participation. And it requires mutual effort, both from us in creating welcoming culture and from you in accepting the invitation and extending yourself towards others. And that means that it involves some risk. There's a risk in being known. There's a risk that you will possibly be disappointed or hurt. But we believe that belonging is worth it, that it is worth pursuing together, trusting that God is at work drawing us toward each other and towards Christ. And so we invite you to belong with us at whatever level feels right for you, for as long as God calls you to be part of this community, with honest acknowledgement that the journey will include both joy and challenge. So, how do you want to belong? That's the question, isn't it? How do you want to belong? And I want to give you some space, just a minute or two, to think quietly about that question. How do you want to belong? And what do you need to do to get there?